Hi everyone, this is Sona Tatsians. I am the founder and managing attorney of Link Law, and this is the second time I'm coming to the Bump Station to talk to you about another topic in estate planning. Today we're going to talk about guardian nomination. What is a guardian nomination and why you need to name one for your children. And we'll be doing a series of these talks. We have 8 altogether, so stay tuned every week. On Wednesday at 3:30 I'll be discussing a different topic. And if you want to talk about specific, if you want me to address something specifically, please let me know. Go ahead and leave it in the notes and I'll go ahead and make sure to talk to you about it. Hi Jennifer, thanks for joining us. So what is a guardian and why do you need one for your children? So when I meet with clients, 2 of the most important questions that we ask them is, who's going to be making financial decisions for you and your children if something was to happen to you, and who's going to take care of your children? Who's going to take them to school, make medical decisions for them, and live with your child, who the child will live with until they turn 18 and become of legal age. So today I'm going to talk about the second part, which is the guardian nomination. So there are 2 types of guardians you can have. You can have a guardian of the person and guardian of the estate. Guardian of the person is someone who takes care of the child on a day-to-day basis and your child lives with them. Guardian of the estate is someone who takes care of the child's finances. If you have a revocable living trust in place, we don't even have to nominate a guardian of the estate because your trust specifically would dictate how your children will get your funds. So think of the guardian of the person as the type of guardian nomination I'll talk about today is someone who will live with your children, will make medical decisions for them, will make everyday decisions for your child until your child turns 18. Now, if you have 2 parents and something was to happen to one of the parents, no one will ever question that the other parent who is involved in the child's life, who has either custody of the child, even in a divorce situation, would get the child. So this would only work, you would only have to nominate a guardian if something was to happen to both parents, or there's only one parent in the child's life and the other one has relinquished their parental rights to the child. So as you can imagine, this is probably the hardest thing for parents to make a decision on, and oftentimes people will not be able to move forward with their estate planning because there's just so many emotions tied to it. One person, maybe the husband wants his side of the family, the wife wants her side of the family, they can never agree on it, and then they just don't go forward with the estate planning. So I want to talk to you a little bit about strategy, to think about when you're nominating someone, and what it would look like to make sure that you have the right people named. First of all, you need to know that whatever you put on paper is not permanent. So I would think of a guardian nomination as something you do in stages. So when you have a baby, you want to nominate people who are in the child's life then, and then these things could change. As you can imagine, for example, if you were to name your parents, who may be in their 60s, maybe 70s, as the guardians, they may not be able to take care of your children once your kids are teenagers and your parents are more elderly, more frail, or may not be able to health-wise take care of them. So don't think of this as something that's set in stone. Think of this as a 3 to 5 year plan, and whatever works for you then works, and then you can go back and revisit and change the plan accordingly. So what are some of the things to think about when you're naming a guardian? So first of all, think about, does the individual live nearby? So if the person does not live nearby, if you're naming someone who's a relative or a close friend who lives outside of the state, we may also want to nominate someone on a short-term temporary basis, 24 to 48 hours, who can stay with your child in case there's an emergency. You and your husband go on a date, you don't come home, what is your babysitter to do? Before calling the police, the babysitter would call your temporary guardian, whether it's your nanny, whether it's your next door neighbor, close friend, mom who lives down the street, someone nearby who can come stay with the child until we're able to locate the parent. So that's something to think about. If you have a guardian who's going to be far away, you want to name someone on a short-term basis. The other thing to do is, people will always ask me, do I need to ask the guardian that I'm going to name him as a guardian? Absolutely. I think it's a good idea for you to ask them and put them on notice that, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, and by the way, I'm thinking of nominating you as a guardian. Now, if you have 2 sets of grandparents, I would not tell one set, hey, you're my first choice, and then tell the other one you're my second choice. I would just say I'm going to nominate you as a guardian and leave it at that. So don't ever tell someone you're my first choice, you're my third choice. And it's always a good idea to have multiple choices, especially if, let's say, the first two sets of parents are grandparents and they're of the older generation. You want to have someone of a younger generation to name as the guardian. So for example, if I was to name one side of grandparents as the first choice, second side as the second choice, and then third would be a sibling or a close friend. The other thing to think about is when you're naming an individual versus a couple, what does that look like? So I like to think of nominating a couple. If you have two adults who the child will go live with, I would rather nominate, let's say, grandma and grandpa together, or either one of them alone. But if you think that, let's say, grandpa alone will not be able to take care of the child, you could say grandma and grandpa alone, or grandma alone, but if grandma has predeceased you, then move on to the next couple, and we never have one of the grandparents to act alone. So that could be something else to think about. So think of whether you want to name a single individual or a couple. Preferably always you want it to be a couple. And my thinking on this is, if you are going to have a child live in a household with other adults, you want to make sure all the adults there can make medical decisions for your child or any other decisions that are necessary, and one doesn't have superior right over the child than the other. So what are some of the things to consider again for nominating a guardian? Is think about the place of residence where the people live. Think of their educational and cultural background. So if you speak a certain language at home, or if you want to follow certain religion at home, you want to make sure that the guardian is able to do the same, and those would be important factors for you to consider when you're choosing your guardians. Primary language spoken, religious and spiritual affiliations, whether the guardian knows your children. A lot of times I'll have clients who will say, you know, my college roommate and I are so close, but I haven't seen her in years. She lives in New York. We still have a close relationship. Well, that person may not have a close relationship with your child. So it's one thing for them to have a good relationship with you, another one with your child. So definitely consider that as well. Whether the potential guardians have their own children. So if you have 2 children and the guardian has 3 children, would they be able to take on 2 more children into those households? All of a sudden they need to buy a bigger house or get a bigger car. Would that be financially feasible? Now, we don't expect the guardian to necessarily use their own funds to do these things, and your trust can specifically provide. If the guardian needs to buy a bigger house or a bigger car to accommodate my children, they can do that. We're not necessarily going to buy them a house outright, but if they purchase a bigger home, your trust could be a partial owner of that for the benefit of your children, or we can provide funds for them to rent a larger home if necessary. And then the other thing that's actually important in LA is I would consider their lifestyle. So smoking, exercising, eating, drinking. I know we're a very healthy city, and I think that matters a lot to other people, specifically people who come from other states and may have family in other states, and they may want to have someone specifically in Los Angeles, their friends, their best friends, their neighbors to raise their children versus family members. If that is particularly the case, you want to make sure you have that in writing, because if you have nothing in writing, typically various family members will go to court and apply to be the guardian of the children. And if numerous people want the child, there would be a hearing, and there, a fight could ensue over who is going to take your children. So if you specifically don't want certain family members to ever have your children, we want to specifically write that down. We can even write down the specific reason why you don't want them to get your kids, whether they have issues with drinking or drugs or gambling, whatever it is that will prevent them from getting your children. You want to have that in writing, and you want your specific wishes to be very clear to the court that these were your wishes and this is how you wanted your children to be raised. The other thing that we can do, which is not a legally binding document, but if you have specific ways and specific things that you want your children to do or be raised in a certain way, you can always write a letter to the guardian. And the letter to the guardian will say, thank you for being the guardian, and thank you for taking on my children. And these are, if I was around, these are the things I would do. I would give them well-versed education, and I would travel with them, or I would make sure that they have a close relationship with their grandparents or their aunts and uncles. Whatever morals or values that are important to you and your family, you want to make sure that the guardian knows about that. If you practice a certain religion, or you have a certain mindset and you believe in reading certain books, you want to make sure you're expressing that to the guardian, so when they're raising your children, they're being able to get your values across to how your child will be raised. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to leave notes in the comments. I'll go make sure that I'll reply to your notes. And next time we'll be talking about what to do with a trust, and why everyone would need a trust in place, and how specifically you can make distributions to your children on the financial side from a revocable living trust. Okay? Until next time, I will see you soon.